A boy wakes up with magical powers in another world. How did he transport to this other world? Will he ever escape? Let's find out today on Anime Recaps. We will be covering the first 4 episodes of the series Ojisan in Another World. It's the fall of 2017, and the protagonist Takafumi learns that his uncle Yousuke, who had been in a coma after a terrific accident 17 years ago, has woken up. But when he arrives at the hospital where his uncle has been kept, Takafumi is surprised to find his uncle talking in a weird language. Yousuke claims that he just returned from another world, Gran Bahamal, after 17 years, prompting Takafumi to believe he has a mental illness. Yousuke wants to prove his claim, and just when Takafumi is sharing about his financial issues, he triggers a wind magic. Takafumi is more than surprised after seeing his uncle do amazing magic tricks. Meanwhile, Yousuke asks him if the video game developer SEGA is still winning the console wars. He becomes upset when he learns SEGA has stopped producing video games, so he immediately writes in his small notebook and chants Ikuras Kora. Takafumi gets curious, asks what the spell means, and learns that it's a memory erasure spell, which his uncle uses whenever he wants to erase something unpleasant. The scene cuts to a week later when Yousuke is discharged from the hospital and moves in with Takafumi. In the meantime, Takafumi decides to monetize his uncle's magical powers by uploading magic trick videos on YouTube, which later helps to generate 60,000 yen in ad revenue. With the talk going on, Takafumi asks Yousuke about his life in the other world, to which his uncle informs him that he was mostly alone for 17 years. He shares that everyone was beautiful there, so he was hunted down as a subspecies of orc. Yousuke laments that things didn't go well for him in the other world. He adds that even though he saved an elf named Elga from a venom dragon, she was pretty rude to him rather than thanking him. But his focus soon shifts when he sees that the YouTube video Takafumi had uploaded was brewing with hate comments, although it had many views. One day, Yousuke decides to buy a Turn model cell phone from an auction, but Takafumi informs him that the model uses a 2G signal, so it won't let him make calls. However, Yousuke insists, sharing that he has no one to call. Yousuke then mentions how he once invented an ever-brimming pot of water using his magic spells for a village suffering from a drought. He shows his memory of the incident using a spell to Takafumi. Instead of praising him, the villagers tried to hang him as the invention didn't fit into their religion. While they were trying to kill him, Elga arrived to rescue him, so Yousuke managed to escape. Takafumi becomes frustrated after learning that his uncle had such a horrendous experience. He then asks his uncle if it's possible to see what happened with Elga, and they learn that she had courageously fought with the villagers. Suddenly, Yousuke gets a notification of the auction, notifying him that he had won the cell phone. He hurriedly accepts the claim without realizing the shipping cost of 2,000 yen. Takafumi suggests to his frustrated uncle that if the location is close, they can pick up his cell phone personally to avoid the shipping cost. To his surprise, Yousuke suddenly leaps out of the window and flies away. He then returns from his trip 30 minutes later with the cell phone in hand. Takafumi is surprised to learn more about his uncle's powers. Sometime later, Takafumi receives a package of rice and asks his uncle to hand him something to cut the box. Yousuke gives him a small sword, which shocks him, and he asks how it suddenly appeared. Yousuke then shows him his storage magic, which is his small notebook. Takafumi asks if Yousuke had brought more stuff from the outer world. Yousuke takes out a ring with a magically crystallized mermaid's tear, which is enough to allow a person to create a castle by selling it. Unfortunately, when he tried to sell it, it was priced at 50 yen. Since the materials in the ring were so rare, no one knew what it was. Takafumi wonders whether Yousuke wanted to give a rare ring to someone as he was carrying it around. So Yousuke settles down to talk about love and mentions his first love, Sonic and Tails, and reminisces about how he used to stand in a toy store all day long to admire Sonic on the title screen. Takafumi digs deeper and asks if he ever met girls in the other world, to which Yousuke agrees and shows him a memory of saving a girl and her 2 brothers from a giant orc. He shares that they were initially scared to see him for the first time, thinking he would hurt them. So the girl decided to sacrifice herself by giving herself up to Yousuke to save her siblings' lives, but he suddenly blanked out as some goblins pushed him into a river. Meanwhile, Takafumi notices in the memory that the girl's brothers were making suspicious moves while trying to get behind Yousuke. and realizes that they actually attacked his uncle from behind. Thankfully, Yousuke was saved by Elga once again. He then forcefully put a ring on her finger to show his gratitude, but it turns out that he later took out the ring, sold it for money, and gave it to Elga, thinking she was following him for money. In the following scene, Yousuke vows to stop participating in online auction to save money. It turns out that their YouTube videos have been declining. Yousuke then shows a magazine he won, listing the result of the SEGA Saturn Reader's Choice. He reveals that he never got to read it since he was sent to the other world. Takafumi doesn't care about his uncle's vent. Yousuke is shocked that a PC-ported Bishoujo game won the contest as the most popular game, while his favorite Guardian Heroes only stood at 197th position. After reading the results, an angry Yousuke lashes out and hovers outside in the pouring rain. As he gets struck by lightning, he angrily rants that Guardian Heroes should have won it because of its incredible gaming quality. Once his uncle settles, Takafumi serves Yousuke some coffee while comforting him that a SEGA Saturn RPG was placed in second. He then learns that Yousuke didn't play RPGs since he could never follow its stories. The mentioning of RPGs reminds Yousuke of the time he had an RPG encounter in the other world. Casting the spell Icarus Elron, he shows Takafumi a memory of where he battled the legendary Dragon of Fire. He mentions that the way to defeat the dragon was to cure the broken heart of an ice witch named Mabel first, so that he could get an ice sword to defeat the dragon. When he met Mabel, she commanded him to get a particular flower that her mother once showed her. Yousuke then went to the fire temple where the dragon lived and slayed the dragon himself without needing the sword. Meanwhile, the doorbell rings, and it's a package delivery containing a SEGA Saturn, Guardian Heroes, and 20 games for it. It turns out that Takafumi wanted to surprise his uncle, but is now hesitant due to Yosuke's recent outburst. Surprisingly, Yousuke is pleased to know this, and the two then play the game together. Later that evening, Yousuke shares how the city's atmosphere reminds him of a game called Alien Storm to Takafumi. He also reminisces about his time spent on New Year's Eve in the other world. So when they arrive home, Yousuke shows his memory of a New Year's Eve party he attended. Although everyone was having a wonderful time, he was all alone and returned to his room for the night. While playing a SEGA Saturn video game together, Yousuke adds that Mabel did come to visit that night, and Takafumi immediately demands to see his memory. Once again, Yousuke casts a spell, and we see that Mabel has asked him to overcome being a coward. After listening to a motivational speech, Mabel offered him her ice sword, but Yousuke declined it. On New Year's Day, Yousuke sits on a street and creepily talks to himself while a girl watches him in fear. Meanwhile, Takafumi approaches her, and the two cherish each other. It turns out the girl's name is Fujimaya, with whom Takafumi had been friends since middle school. After a brief chat, he invites Fujimaya to his place and Fujimaya happily accepts. She then shares that she'll come over after dropping off her groceries. 30 minutes later, Fujimaya arrives at Takafumi's place, but he messages that he is out getting snacks, so he tells her to be seated. When she enters his apartment, Yousuke arrives hovering outside the window. He immediately tries to erase her memory of what she might have seen, but Takafumi fortunately comes stopping him and explains that she's a friend. Next, Yousuke and Takafumi explain to Fujimaya about Yousuke's magical adventure in YouTube videos. Fujimaya then claims that Yousuke should leave Takafumi and should not depend on his poor nephew for financials. Yousuke deduces that she loves Takafumi, but she denies it. The show cuts to the next scene, where Takafumi returns home only to find Fujimaya with Elga from Yosuke's memories. After this, we are taken to 75 minutes earlier, where Takafumi reads an email addressed to his uncle. After reading the mail, he finds that YouTube's newly imposed restrictions want users to have 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 hours of watch time, which could cause his uncle to be jobless. It's then revealed that the reason for Yousuke's low viewership on YouTube and subscriber count is his rude reply comments. Yousuke then confesses to Takafumi that he hadn't seen such a response from people since his time in the sealed city Luveldrum. He then shows a memory to Takafumi of when he was in the city. In the memory, Elga talked about her barriers surrounding the town, which protected the city from thousands of monsters. But Yousuke casts a spell to destroy the barrier to test his skills. Soon after, an army of giant cyclops and a cloud dragon appeared outside the city. When Elga tried to control the army of monsters, the barrier re-erected around the city. It turns out that Yousuke asked the spirits to repair the broken barrier. In return for not telling the city people that he broke the barrier, Elga asked Yousuke to take her to dinner that night, but he fled away to avoid being followed in the future. Recalling that he used to ask spirits for help in the other world, Yousuke pleads on his YouTube page to subscribe to his channel. Surprisingly, he gets enough subscriptions to save his channel. By that time, Fujimaya arrives and wonders what the uncle and nephew are doing. Soon after, she again lectures Yousuke that Takafumi hasn't been able to make a girlfriend live with him due to him living there. Hearing this, Yousuke suggests that Fujimaya live there as well, but Takafumi brushes it off and leaves to do some errands. Once Takafumi is gone, Yousuke vainly tries to have a heart-to-heart conversation with Fujimaya about Takafumi's relationship with her. He then steps out of the room, magically reappearing as Elga, who introduces herself as Takafumi's aunt. Elga also tries to continue her conversation with Fujimaya until Takafumi returns home. Takafumi immediately realizes it's his uncle who has magically transformed himself into Elga so that he can have a girl-to-girl talk with Fujimaya. Later, he suggests that they create another YouTube video about Yousuke's transformation magic. Before the video is completely uploaded, the three watch a memory of Takafumi's past with Fujimaya. Meanwhile, the video gets uploaded and instantly goes viral, but Yousuke realizes that the people in the other world, in reality, are all the same and want to go for good looks. Realizing only his transformation into a pretty girl got him significant success in viewership, he becomes sad and reforms back into his true self. Despite Yousuke's pride as a YouTuber torn to shreds, the three enjoy a deluxe sushi dinner on the payout day. In the following scene, Yousuke shows a memory of Takafumi and Fujimaya of their childhood. Takafumi is being bullied by two students about the fantasy-themed novel he's reading in the classroom. Eventually, an even bigger bully, Fujimaya, handles the situation between the two bullies, saving Takafumi. Later, Fujimaya notes how delicious the coffee that Takafumi had served tastes. Takafumi reveals that his uncle had given him 10,000 yen for his birthday, so he purchased a coffee maker. Fujimaya then sends Takafumi a text of a picture of her in a swimsuit from middle school for his birthday present, but Takafumi immediately tries to delete it, realizing it could be arrested for having an underage picture on his phone. Just then, he receives a notification about a sale on coffee beans and rushes out of the apartment. Meanwhile, Yousuke tells Fujimaya that her picture lost its appeal to some coffee beans notification. She immediately bursts into anger, causing Yousuke to spill his coffee on her, but he tries to soothe the situation by magically freezing her, only to make it messier. After the freezing ice settles, he offers Fujimaya some towels to use for a shower and tells her that he is stepping out for a couple of hours. When Fujimaya is done with her shower, she puts on Takafumi's shirt. Meanwhile, Takafumi enters the scene. The stare-off between the two occurs. Fujimaya immediately corners in embarrassment, causing Takafumi to leave the scene while apologizing. Later, Takafumi calls his uncle to erase his memory of seeing Fujimaya in an improper state. Before Yousuke can do it, Fujimaya tries to stop him. Next, on Fujimaya's 20th birthday, she enjoys some beer and snacks with Takafumi. Uncle Yousuke soon joins them, and since he doesn't have a proper present for her birthday, he gives Fujimaya his wisdom: a pinch is a chance. He then explains that the phrase is about how changing one's perspective on a negative outlook can change a situation for the better. He shows them the memory of the first time he had alcohol. While he is busy drinking alcohol, Elga appears wearing a lovely green dress. She then confronts Yousuke about the broken barrier the other day, so he shoves a piece of meat in her mouth to keep her shut. Elga settles down and then talks about the blaze dragon that Yousuke slew. Yousuke also shows Elga the blaze dragon fire he got after killing the dragon. Yousuke then rephrases his catchphrase, ultimately revealing that he learned it from a Puyo Puyo gaming strategy guide. In the present, Takafumi and Fujiyama are disappointed over knowing this, while his uncle flees away to play some Puyo Puyo. Later, the memory continues, where Yousuke takes a reluctant Elga back to his inn as he is heavily drunk to go back on his own. Upon arriving at his room, he thanks Elga and hurriedly shuts the door. It turns out that Elga was hoping to finally have private time with him, only to be disappointed in the end. The following day, she confronts him and demands to know why he was rude last night. Once the memory concludes, Fujimaya takes a drink and forces Uncle Yousuke to drink too. Yousuke is soon drunk, so Fujimaya decides to leave for home. Yousuke then decides to take her home using a wind spell. The drunken spell causes the three to leap out the window and fly high into the sky.